The Iron Bank of Bravos has one rule. The Iron Bank will have its due. And in the world of Game of Thrones, that line sends shivers down the spines of kings and queens alike. An institution so powerful that it can topple dynasties, fund rebellions, and make the most dangerous people in Westeros sweat through their armor. Pretty terrifying, right? Well, what if I told you that a real family of bankers in Renaissance Italy made the Iron Bank look like a neighborhood credit union? A family that didn't just fund wars, they started them. A family that didn't just influence kings, they literally installed popes. A family that survived assassination attempts, ordered a few of their own, and built a financial empire so vast that the modern banking system still carries their fingerprints. Today, we're putting the Iron Bank of Bravos head-to-head against the Medici dynasty of Florence. And honestly, reality is going to win this one in the most disturbing way possible. Buckle up. Let's start with what we know about the Iron Bank. In George R.R. Martin's universe, the Iron Bank of Bravos is the most powerful financial institution in the known world. Founded by former slaves who hid their valuables in an iron mine, the bank grew into something that could dictate the fate of entire continents. Their business model is elegantly brutal. They lend money to governments. If those governments refuse to pay, the bank funds their enemies. As Tywin Lannister himself acknowledged, you don't want to be on the wrong side of the Iron Bank's ledger. We see this play out dramatically in the series. When Cersei defaults on the crown's debts, the bank backs Stannis Baratheon. They essentially go shopping for a replacement king. And this is framed as one of the most dangerous threats the Iron Throne has ever faced. Arguably scarier than dragons, because you can't burn a balance sheet with dragonfire. Well, you can, but they'll have copies. The Iron Bank also has implied connections to the Faceless Men, Bravos' guild of supernatural assassins. So if their financial pressure doesn't work, there's always the option of sending a shape-shifting killer to your bedroom. That's a pretty solid collections department. But here's the thing. Almost everything terrifying about the Iron Bank, the Medici did it in real life. And then some. Without any magic. The Medici family rose to prominence in Florence in the late 1300s. Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici founded the Medici Bank around 1397, and within a generation, his family controlled the most profitable financial network in Europe. At their peak, the Medici Bank had branches in Rome, Venice, Geneva, Bruges, London, and beyond. They were the bankers to popes, kings, and entire nation-states. Now, on the surface, this sounds like the Iron Bank's origin story. Former outsiders build a financial empire, but the Medici went so much further because they didn't just lend money to power. They became the power. Giovanni's son, Cosimo de' Medici, essentially became the shadow ruler of Florence without ever holding an official title. He controlled elections, manipulated tax policy to bankrupt his rivals, and used his financial leverage to exile or destroy anyone who opposed him. When a rival faction actually managed to exile Cosimo in 1433, he simply called in every debt he was owed across Florence. The economy cratered within a year. The city begged him to come back. Let me repeat that. A banker crashed an entire city's economy as a power move, and they rewarded him for it. The Iron Bank could never. Cosimo's grandson, Lorenzo the Magnificent, took things even further. He survived a literal assassination attempt in a cathedral. The Pazzi conspiracy of 1478, where his brother Giuliano was stabbed 19 times during Easter Mass. And here's where it gets wild. The assassination was backed by Pope Sixtus IV. The actual pope tried to have the Medici murdered. Lorenzo survived, rallied the people of Florence, and then systematically destroyed the Pazzi family. Their properties were seized. Their name was literally banned. Members of the family were hunted down and killed. Some were hung from the windows of government buildings. Lorenzo didn't just get revenge, he erased a bloodline. The Iron Bank funds rival kings. That's impressive. But the Medici funded rival gods. Well, gods' representatives on Earth at least, which in the 1500s was arguably more powerful. The Medici didn't just bank for the papacy, they captured it. The family produced not one, not two, but 4 popes: Leo X, Clement VII, Pius IV, and Leo XI. They also produced 2 queens of France. This is a banking family that literally sat on the throne of Christendom and the throne of one of Europe's greatest kingdoms. Let's talk about how they got there. The relationship between the Medici Bank and the Vatican was essentially a masterclass in corruption. The Medici managed papal finances, which meant they controlled the flow of money from Catholic donations across all of Europe. They took their cut, obviously, but more importantly, they used this position to build alliances with cardinals, bishops, and political figures across the continent. When Giovanni de' Medici became Pope Leo X in 1513, he reportedly said, "God has given us the papacy, let us enjoy it." And enjoy it he did. He spent so lavishly that he nearly bankrupted the Vatican, which, considering the Vatican's income streams, is genuinely hard to do. He also escalated the sale of indulgences, which is essentially selling forgiveness for sins. This practice became so outrageous that it directly inspired Martin Luther to write his 95 Theses, which kicked off the Protestant Reformation. Let that sink in. A banking family's greed was so extreme that it accidentally split Christianity in half. The Iron Bank's most dramatic move was backing a different claimant to a fictional throne. The Medici literally fractured the dominant religion of an entire continent as a side effect of their spending habits. One of the Iron Bank's most feared tactics is funding your enemy's rivals. Refuse to pay, and suddenly your worst enemy has a brand new army. It's a devastating strategy in Westeros. But the Medici turned financial warfare into something far more sophisticated and far more personal. The Medici didn't just fund your enemies, they would systematically destroy you through economic manipulation in ways that would make modern hedge fund managers weep with admiration. They would manipulate exchange rates between currencies at their various international branches. They could make a rival merchant's goods worthless overnight by adjusting the value of the currency their contracts were written in. They used something called bills of exchange, which were essentially early forms of checks and credit instruments, to move money across borders in ways that no one else fully understood. This gave them an information advantage that was, for their era, the equivalent of having insider trading access to every market in Europe simultaneously. They also weaponized taxation. When Cosimo controlled Florence's government from behind the scenes, he used a progressive tax system called the catasto to selectively ruin his political opponents. Rivals would find themselves assessed at impossibly high rates, while Medici allies got favorable treatment. If you couldn't pay, you lost your property and your political rights. It was legal, it was devastating, and it was entirely by design. The Medici also pioneered double-entry bookkeeping, which sounds boring until you realize it meant they could track their finances with a precision that no rival could match. They knew exactly how much leverage they had over every client, every government, and every competitor. Information was power, and the Medici had more of it than anyone. So let's run the final scoreboard. The Iron Bank funds rival claimants to thrones. The Medici installed popes, queens, and de facto dictators. The Iron Bank has implied connections to magical assassins. The Medici survived real assassination attempts in churches and responded by erasing entire families from existence. The Iron Bank threatens economic consequences for default. The Medici crashed the economy of one of Europe's greatest cities just to prove a point, and the city thanked them for it. The Iron Bank operates from a single city. The Medici had branches across Europe and controlled the financial infrastructure of the Catholic Church, the most powerful institution on the planet at the time. And here's the thing George R.R.R. Martin has openly acknowledged. The Iron Bank is inspired by real institutions like the Medici Bank and the great banking houses of medieval Italy. But even Martin, a writer famous for his willingness to portray brutal, morally complex power dynamics, toned it down for fiction. Because if he'd written a family that installed popes, accidentally caused a religious schism, survived cathedral assassinations, erased rival bloodlines, and invented modern banking practices all while patronizing Michelangelo and Botticelli on the side, readers would have said it was too unrealistic. The Medici remind us that the real world doesn't need dragons or faceless men to produce stories of breathtaking ambition, ruthlessness, and power. Sometimes a ledger book is more dangerous than a Valyrian steel sword. Sometimes the most terrifying words in history aren't "the Iron Bank will have its due." They're "the Medici, send their regards. So what do you think? Could the Iron Bank have survived 5 minutes against the Medici, or would Cosimo have bought Bravos before breakfast? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear your takes on this one. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the intersection of real history and fantasy, smash that like button. It really does help the channel more than you might think. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video, where we're going to be looking at whether Tywin Lannister's military strategies would have actually worked in real medieval warfare. Spoiler, some of them absolutely would have, and some would have gotten him killed in about 15 minutes. Until then, remember, always pay your debts, especially if your banker has a pope on speed dial. See you in the next one.